Been a long time since I've been live, in part because of the holidays and in part because January was just this total whirlwind. So here we are, clear into mid February, going live again, getting back in the calendar. Today we're talking about what your site should be doing for you, specifically four things that happen when your messaging is spot on, when it's correct, when your offer audience is all dialed in. There's four things that it should be doing. We are going to be chatting about all of that here in the next few minutes. Um, but before I dive in, if you are in the marketing space and you are interested in joining me for an interview as a guest for coffee conversations here live, let's do it. Let's figure out how to make it work. And just message me, drop a comment here, all of the things, and we'll get things rolling. With that said, what are the four things that your site does for you? Um, if your messaging is dialed in, if all of these things are right, the very first thing it does, regardless, is it gives you legitimacy or credibility. When those two words mix, it becomes legitimability, but that's not something I actually say. That's just like the way the words are coming out now. Basically, the simple act of having a site that backs up what you're doing, what you're putting out into the world, it makes you look like the real deal that you are. Whether you are a small business, whether you are an online business, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a big company, having a site that looks reasonably well put together, that backs up what you're talking about, what you're doing, all of that. And I can't tell you the number of businesses who are still quite small, or even quite large, that operate regionally or locally and do most of their business on referrals. The number of them that don't have websites, the fact that what happens is when they get a website, all of a sudden it starts opening doors for them. And that's because the first thing that you do when you are considering working with someone is you look them up, you Google them. And if there's no website, if there's not a lot of information about the company that's out there, or if your site exists, but it says you're a travel agency when in fact, I don't know, you're some kind of consultancy, um, that opens some red flags. Some of the other things that create red flags along this line of thinking is if there's no information about the company owners, if there's no information about where you do business or what kind of business you do, if all of your links are broken. And it's not to say that a couple of links can't be broken. Over time, things just kind of shift with sites and not everything shifts with the changes. Um, to that point, I have some broken links on my site that I just found this week, and they're fixed now. But the point is, it can be a couple, but it can't be your major pages. It can't be the major, like, home, about, services, contact page in your main website. So, um, what it has to do to give you this legitimacy and credibility, the legitimability, is to tell the story your audience needs to hear, not in a manipulative way, but recognizing that you understand their problems and you have the solution to give them. So we're not talking about telling fairy tales. We're talking about like the truth in your words. And it's really awesome when it reflects your clients' thoughts. Maybe it's their words out loud, but the best possible website is when someone comes to you and they're like, I feel like you're talking directly to me, whether it's a website. And I think that redounds to all of the marketing as well, right? It redounds to the emails that you send. It redounds to what you put out in social media. Man, I feel like you get me. Cool. That's where we want it to be. Um, so let's talk about, though, what that messaging looks like. And I feel like I'm putting the cart ahead of the horse because I want to talk about this more later. But how do we get there? How do we figure that out? It means making sure you know your audience. It means making sure you know how to solve the problem. Because a lot of the times, the problem that you think you solve isn't necessarily the problem that you solve for them, right? People don't usually come to me going, man, I really could use some good copy. Sometimes they do, which is awesome when they get it. But usually there's some kind of conversation like my marketing just isn't jiving. Something about it isn't connecting with my audience. I get people in the door and talk to them, and if I can do that, it's great. But sometimes it's hard to get them on the phone. Usually that means there's some kind of a disconnect across the board. So A lot of your messaging really means paying attention to what your audience has to say. Um, Hearing them how they talk about your problems, hearing your like, dream clients that you've loved working with talk about your company in terms that are more like, this is why we went with you. Man, we hired you to do this, but you surprised me because you did this. This is where we can unlock these really cool nuggets. And that's where we can ramp up beyond just a basic legitimability. I think I'm going to own that, by the way. It's where you go beyond basic to something that's conversion focused. So we can talk more about that at literally any time because this is something I love. Incidentally, I am teaching a workshop in 2 weeks' time where we're diving into this very thing. Okay, so let's move on to the second thing that your website does for you when it's all dialed in. It gives you ownership over your content. And I love social media. That is how I built my business. That is how I built these relationships that have formed my business. It is powerful. It's also a lot of work. The other thing that happens is when you post to social media, you no longer necessarily own your content. Any number of things could make it go away, from a glitch to someone taking over your favorite social network and laying off like 80% of the staff, and then all of a sudden it's not the same thing. Not that that's a real world example or anything. There's also things like, if that does go away, or if your audience is alienated, they're not going to be hanging out there anymore either. But when you own your website, all of the content lives there. So maybe you can put some of that on social media, but if everything that you're doing is driving traffic to the website, that does some amazing things. So for example, a lot of my social interactions, they still happen on LinkedIn, they still happen on Facebook groups. But a lot of them actually happen in Slack groups and personal introductions these days. So it's not to say that it doesn't work other places, but that's where I hang out. So if I'm not as active on social networks or on WhatsApp or which is again not truly a social network, it's just a communication platform. What happens to the content that you're putting out there? Like your email list, you own it. That is something that you own, that you always have. So when the internet breaks, or it mysteriously eats your content or whatever, you're not SOL. You've got like this backup. And theoretically, if you've got a really good website host, you've got a 24/7 backup available where they're backing it up every 24 hours and you have perpetual access to it. If not, there's some usually great plugins and great ways to be tracking that. So ownership is huge. This number 3 thing is also really closely related because it gives you permission to disappear. Maybe you are ready to take a month and a half off from work. Maybe you're like me and you take huge chunks of time off at the end of the year. Like I usually take 10 days off around Thanksgiving, and I usually take 2 to 3 weeks off around Christmas just because that's when my family's off. That's when we can go do stuff. Similarly, I take like big chunks of time off in the summer because I want to be able to like be present and do things and do fun things and not be tied into meetings and calls. It's not to mean that I don't work. Anyway, I sort of disappear off of social media and I'm only there when I need to be. I have an amazing VA who helps me show up on a regular basis. But if I don't have time to, or for example, this live, I needed to take January off for my mental health. Not because of overdoing anything, primarily because I just had enough going on and I needed that break. I was not ready to pick this back up yet. So, because of my website, because of my email list, because of the little bit of social media that Carrie's doing on my behalf, it means that I've been able to stay on top of things. And because it's all because I have this website. I wasn't creating new content. I was not writing new blogs. I was doing the bare minimum for even sending emails to my list. And it was all because we could be going back to the website. We could be pointing everything back to the website. So not a big deal if you don't blog for a while. Not a big deal. It does not look like you've abandoned ship if you're not posting 24/7 or even once a week. So permission to disappear is number 3. Number 4 is the biggest one for me. Confidence to take action because you are no longer apologizing for the state of your website. You know your site's going to be there to back you up. You know that in every conversation or interaction you have, you can direct people back to your site. You're like, yeah, want to know what I do? Push people to your site. And it makes it very, very, very clear that you're doing something that can help their business grow. So if your site isn't delivering across any of these things, let's chat about how that could work. Because as I mentioned earlier, I am hosting a USP training workshop in, oh my gosh, just 2 weeks. Yeah, like I said, just 2 weeks, where we're going to go into this. I'm going to teach you like what a USP even is if you're not familiar with it. By the way, it's a unique selling proposition, but it's your wow factor. It's what you do. It's the way you talk about what you do and explain it to your audience. It can form the basis of your elevator pitch, your mission statement, your vision, all of those things, or it can be separate. But generally speaking, it's the foundation of all of your marketing and messaging. So it's really important to nail it and get it right. So in addition to telling you like what it is, how to create one, what it isn't, we're also going to show you like how to use it as the foundation of your messaging, how to use it as the foundation of all of the marketing, how to use it as the foundation of your copywriting, specifically for your website. So it's going to be amazing. I plugged the link into the comments here. You should have that. The other thing that I want to make sure that we are able to do is give you information on how you can do it yourself. If you want to go beyond this training, if you want to go beyond it and then actually start using it to create your brand messaging, to create your website copy, I have a course that is launching at the end of this month. We kick off in March, and it's going to be incredible, the things that we can do. So with that in mind, I hope to see you there. If you have questions, comments, all of the above, just let me know. I'm more than happy to discuss any of it with you. All right. Talk to you soon.